Hi, friends, it's Emily. Welcome to this episode of the Patchwork Revival podcast, the podcast that celebrates the generational connection we find in the quilts that we love. This episode is one that I have been so excited to bring to you guys. We're talking today with my friend Allee Nix, Dr. Allee Nix. She has just graduated from medical school, and Allee is someone who I found on social media, sort of a friend of a friend, tagged in a post. I kind of realized she was a medical student at the time, and I thought, I was a medical student and I was quilting, so obviously we're automatically friends. I reached out to Allee. Just over time, I've been kind of talking with her, checking in on her, making sure she's doing well because being a medical student is really dadgum hard. And she's such a beautiful soul. I've enjoyed getting to know her on the internet, and I finally got to have a conversation with her over the computer, but still face to face. It was so fun. And I'm bringing that conversation to you guys today. We're going to talk all about her adventures in quilting, how she got started, sort of how she's carrying on her mother and her grandmother's legacy. Is such a special story. And also diving into the idea of how to prioritize being creative and why that's so important, even when you're a medical student and you're hardly sleeping, you're hardly eating, and you're trying to learn everything you can about so many things. So, with that, I want to talk about making time to make with my friend Allee Nix. Let's go. Go ahead, Allee, and tell us just about you. Give us an introduction. You should have a lot of practice by now with your
Yeah.
interviewing.
So I'm Allie. I grew up outside of Austin, Texas, in a house with my parents and a younger brother. And we grew up kind of in a suburban area, but my mom grew up in a more rural area, and she grew up with home ec and 4-H. And so there was always sewing machines and sewist present in her life, and she kind of brought that to our home as well. So she was a stay-at-home mom, but the closet she shared with my father, that was her sewing space. They didn't have keep clothes in there. They had turned it into a little sewing room for her. So I've kind of always grown up around people sewing. She sewed, and then her mom, my maternal grandmother, also sewed. So either spending time at my house or at my grandparents' house, there was always somebody. There was a sewing machine in the background. You could hear the sound. And so I kind of take for granted, like growing up with so much sewing exposure. Like when people tell me they want to start sewing, I'm like, hey, let's get out the ironing board, let's get out the machine and like go. And I don't think people always understand kind of all the steps or like the process of sewing. So, yeah, I remember my mom she didn't really quilt. We did like very few quilts together. She was mostly a garment sewer. So all of my Halloween costumes, if we had a presentation at school, of course, growing up in Texas history, I feel like every grade we had a Texas history like
Oh, yeah.
event. And so I
And
have
a
a
full
lot of
blown, yeah, like a full blown
like Western
costume
Day.
presentation. Yeah.
Yes. So I have quite a few. Like actually, my childhood closet is now full of like all the outfits my mom made me growing up. They're kind of hung and washed and ironed and like just on hold for now. But
Mm-hmm.
lots of shirts and tops, matching outfits, overalls. I think we've got Cinderella and Snow White mixed in there. Like, really, if there was any big event coming up, my mom would take me to Hobby Lobby and we'd find special fabric and make an outfit for it. So,
Oh, that's so
um,
sweet.
those are kind of my earliest memories of sewing.
Mm-hmm. Do you, did you ever ask to sew, or did it just kind of, where is it just like, Ellie, come help me do this? Or do you remember
Yeah,
that?
I do remember I was an American Girl doll fan
Oh,
and I
yeah.
got Kirsten Larson. So when I got her, I wanted to make clothes for her and a quilt for her. So I remember kind of the first thing we made together was like a little quilt for my Kirsten. So
Mm-hmm.
it was, I will say, like I was like kindergarten, first grade. I was young. I remember I was in like our elementary school. And so I think I did a lot of the picking out the fabric and the pattern, and my mom did more of the legwork of like helping
Yeah.
cut. And so, but I got to sit
Yeah.
at the machine with her, and she kind of taught me like this is how you sew a straight line, and you keep your fabric edges lined up right here on the fourth, quarter of an inch mark.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my first experience. And then we dove into like sewing clothes for her, which I look back now is such an undertaking. Like sewing tiny clothes, little seams, like I avoid stuff like that now. I'm like, I don't want to deal with the like minutia, but she was so patient with me, like sewing things that would fit like a little doll. Like we did
Yeah.
Barbies and we did American Girl dolls. So Barbies are even smaller. Like sewing clothes
Yeah,
for them is
Barbie
kind of
clothes. Oh my gosh.
it is a piece of work. So I look back and I can like so fondly see how much she cared for me and was willing to like undertake these projects with me, even though they were like very tedious.
Yeah, very tedious. I've talked before. I could probably sew garments because I think I could, but I'm scared. I'm like that's just like a different world for me. I don't know if I could do that. But I started making my daughter these little like stuffy doll things, and the
Yes.
patterns come with different clothes for each little like the bunny has its own little dress and the cat has
Oh.
its own little dress. And every
Yeah.
time it comes to the clothes part, I'm like, can this just be naked? Like, I
Yeah.
cannot. Like, I do it,
You can just be a
but
little
I
stuffed
do,
animal.
yeah, I do like a really basic, like, skirt with an elastic waist and like little straps. But I'm like, how do
Yes.
people sew these tiny arm, like, sleeves into these tiny, I don't know,
Yeah,
more
no,
power.
they can be so intricate. I Garment sewing is a completely different world than like quilting sewing. Then bag
Mm-hmm.
making is its own thing. There's really kind of all different ways to jump into sewing.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, I really think your skills translate to all the other things, but it really helps to have like a guide with you or someone to be like, it's going to be okay. This is how we do this.
Yes, oh for sure. No, the first time I tackled like a ruffle, I it's so intimidating. And looking back now, I'm like ruffles are easy. But if you've never done it before, you need someone who can sit there and be like, these are the strings you pull. This is what you set your attention to, and just like help you through it.
Yeah. One day we'll meet in person and you can teach me how to do a good ruffle without
Oh,
like
they're easy.
sweating
You
or
can
being
do
terrified.
it. We will. We will.
Yeah. I see people doing like a ruffled quilt binding.
They're so
Have you
cute.
seen
I
that?
haven't
They're
gotten brave enough
adorable.
to tackle it yet. It looks like many
It
more
looks
steps, and I'm
like,
kind of a
yes,
lazy sewer sometimes.
it looks like a lot of work, a lot of work. Um, so I love hearing your sewing history. But part of the reason I wanted to talk to you on the podcast is because you are a medical student and you're finishing med school and you're about to match into your residency. So I wanted you to tell us a little bit about sort of your life, what your days look like, what you're expecting in residency, because number one, if you've never done it, you just don't know. And it sets the stage for how we're going to talk about the importance of making time to make stuff. So,
Yeah. Well, I can kind of talk about first I'll talk about getting back into sewing. So
mm-hmm.
I remember like sewing off and on projects with my mom during my childhood. And then of course like junior high and high school come along and you just get busy. Like I was
Yeah.
in sports, I was in a small town, like we did stuff with all of our friends all of the time. And so it kind of fell to the wayside. And in high school, actually, my mom was sick and ended up passing away. And her parents, my grandparents, took her sewing machine and like just because they knew like none of us were using it at that time and had it serviced. And my grandmother used it for a while, like alternating with her so it would stay kind of in good running order. And then
Mm-hmm.
like they just let me know like it's always here at our house when you're ready for it. Just say the word, but we'll have it ready like and waiting for you basically. And so they kept it serviced for about 5, 7 years. And when I was in medical school, I was living in the same city as them, and they dropped it off at my house one day. And I was kind of just in a bout of like, all I do is study. I sit at this computer and I use like brain power to study. And I had been working through a Bible study about the importance of Sabbath and how, like, if you're working with your hands during the week, you should like Sabbath with your brain. And if you're working with your brain during the week, you should Sabbath with your hands. And I was like, I really want to do something like with this sewing machine. I feel like it's a good way to kind of disconnect from the world of medicine, even if it's just for like a little bit. And so that's kind of how I got started. I'd seen some TikToks, like everybody,
Oh,
of
yeah.
cute like quilted bags and quilts, and I was like, I feel like I could do that. It's kind of like that sheer confidence that only like novices have, but I was
Oh,
like, I
yeah.
just want to give it a try. And so yeah, that's when I got my mom's machine out and just started tackling projects with it. I picked up fabric at estate sales. I was sewing on a machine that had been given to me and taken care of so well by my grandparents, and just kind of got started, and I really haven't stopped since. So it's looked different in every season. Kind of in those preclinical years, you're mostly on your own for studying. So I would set aside like half a day on a weekend to maybe try to jump in. And then I started my clerkship years, which you're at the hospital all the time.
Yeah.
And they're kind of 8-week stretches. But at the end of that 8 weeks, you have a weekend off. And so I knew like at the end of every clerkship, I had a full weekend to sew, like no interruptions. And so it's looked different. And then fourth year is kind of a more relaxed year as you're interviewing for residency. So I've gotten to sew a ton this year. So it's looked different in every season. And I'm not sure what residency will hold, but I know I will find time.
Yeah. It'll be similar. I mean, it's crazy. And there's some like horrible parts of it. I like look back on residency and I don't really know how I did it, but I did. It was fine. I survived. I'm totally fine.
Yeah.
I was sewing a little bit in med school, kind of like you. It was for the same, just like I just need like the meditative, repetitive, like turn the brain off and just like
Yeah.
be. And I knew that sewing was kind of like that for me. And so I kind of got back into it. But residency was when it was like, I have to do that because that was my way of really being still and stopping and processing stuff. Like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this happened or that happened, or I'm really stressed out or whatever. You just need a break from all that. So I like that you said that because that's exactly how I got really, like, really back into it. So,
Yeah. And even though you're like following a pattern and you're problem solving to an extent, it's relaxing. It's a different kind of problem solving. And so it's like it's a great way. I feel the same way like when I take a walk. It's like your brain can finally process everything that has happened during the day or happened during the clerkship, or it's just like kind of a way to um work with your hands, and also your mind just kind of wanders off, and that's where you can kind of decompress a little bit.
yeah. And I think too, my brain really loves the feeling of like, I made that, or like, I don't know, I like translating my vision into something I make with my hands. I don't know, my brain is all about that. And
Yeah.
I picked a specialty where I do procedural things. And you're going to be doing that too.
Hopefully. Yeah.
You will. You will. We're going to just put it out there. You're going to. So, for our listeners, so the way it works when you're a medical student, you choose a specialty, you interview at programs for that specialty, and then you go through a process called the match. That's literally what it's called, the match.
Trademarked. Yep.
Yes. And you basically, anywhere you interviewed, you rank from 1 to 100. Hopefully you didn't interview at 100 places, but that's just hypothetical. And then they rank all the people they interviewed 1 to like a million. And then some computer algorithm twiddles all the numbers and dials, and then it spits out a match. So then on what day is match day this year?
The 21st. So a week
Okay.
from tomorrow.
Yeah. So you're not stressed at all right now. That's what you're saying.
No.
But so then the match day is like a holiday almost in medicine. Like everybody knows match day is the day that every fourth year medical student across the entire United States gets an envelope at a certain time and you open it up. Well, we did it with envelopes, but I don't know. Are y'all doing like a ceremony or do you just check your email?
Um, so our the campus I'm at gave us the option. We can come in person or we can open the email, and then there's a celebration that night. So
Uh huh.
I think depending on how the week goes, I will either go in person or just open it
Yeah.
at home with like my family around. So
Yeah. Well, that's a little bit better because ours was just like we were all in this big like room at some hotel, a
yeah,
ballroom with chairs.
that's
And
how it
then
goes. Yep.
our family was like with us and we all got called to the stage to be given our envelope, but then you had to sit and hold it for like, 100 more people to get called. It was the craziest thing. But then you open it and it tells you where you're going to be for the next, what is it, 3 to 7 or 8 years, depending on your specialty. So
Yeah, I
it's
know. So we're
it's like the
we're
world's worst
excited.
surprise, but somehow I'm really excited for you. But yeah, um, I can't remember how we got on that, but I felt like it was very important for people to know what the match is.
Yes. Well, I explain it to my grandparents every year. So, for people who aren't attuned to it, it's a kind of its own thing in the world of medicine.
It is. And then when you do explain it to people, they're like, "Excuse me, what?" Like you
You
have
just
very
get one
little
offer
control over
or zero
your
offers.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
wild. It's wild. But so we were talking about specialties. So there's always the stress of am I going to match? What if I don't match? What if? But I'm just going to say, Allie, I think you're going to match and you're going to be an amazing physician in your specialty of choice. So I'm very excited for you.
Thank you.
So we were talking a little bit about doing things with our hands, and we're both kind of doing specialties that require us to use our hands. So, and do procedures and things like that, but also a mind power as well. So,
Yeah.
um,
I'm excited.
yeah, I'm excited for you. It's going to be really awesome. In fact, whenever I had like two of my best friends ever were my co-residents, two of my co-residents. And I remember in the last year of residency, I was like, I have to make them a quilt. I have to make them a quilt. Like it just became this compulsion I had. And I think it's because quilting is like my love language or something of that sort. And so I was like, I love them so much. I'm going to miss them. Like we all kind of knew what we were going to do next. And
Yeah.
I was like, made them quilts, but I was like up into the wee hours of all the extra time I had. I remember my husband was like, you could always mail it to them. I was like, no, I have to finish it. But I'm
Yeah.
like, I found a lot of little pockets of time to still keep being creative and making things. So
I totally agree that quilting can be a love language, and I think it can be hard though, if you like attach expectations to it. But for
yes.
me growing up, we always had a stack of quilts in the trunk in case we landed at the park or, somewhere where we might like need a quilt to throw out on the ground while we're hanging out or seeing people. And so that's what I try to remind people when I give them quilts. It's like it's something it's not precious. Like to me, the quilts I make are not precious. I'm like, it can go in the washing machine. It's made to
Yes.
be used. Like that's what you're
Use
gonna,
it.
especially like all of my friends are having babies. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, babies are not clean. Like inherently, it's gonna get spit
No.
up on it. Something's gonna happen, And so, yeah, I think they're such a love language. And I actually ended up making. So we had like a very small wedding not too long ago, and I made both of my matrons of honor quilts. So just to kind of commemorate the
Oh,
time. Yeah,
yes. See, you just sow all your thoughts and your love into this thing, and then you remember the moment and the quilt forever.
yeah,
I made a quilt for one of my Annie was one of my co-residents. I made her a quilt, And then her and her husband had a baby around the same time we had our first baby. And so I made Madeline a quilt. And Annie texted me one day and was like, what is the best way to care for this fabric? Because Madeline vomited on her quilt. And I
Oh,
think she was like horrified to tell me. She's like, she just insists on using it every night on her bed. And I was like almost crying because I was so
that's like the
proud. I
biggest
was like,
privilege. Yeah.
I know. I was like, you just throw it in the washing machine. Hot water is fine. Like, just take care of it like it's an old sheet. And I texted her later. I was like, did everything work out okay? Because I will make another quilt if I need to. She was like,
Oh,
no, it's
yeah.
fine. It's but good as new. So,
Exactly. See,
yeah.
to me, I know there's like a debate amongst quilters, but to me, I like quilts are made to be used. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
the most loved quilts are the ones that have stains or maybe the bindings coming up a little bit on this one corner. You know, like they've been well loved.
Yes. So, you just kind of decided because of TikTok you were going to make quilts. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw quilted bags, which I actually brought one that I made that I can show you if you want.
Yes, of
They're like
course.
little
Oh, like
bags,
a
like this, like
boxy
a little
zipper
makeup bag.
pouch.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
so cute.
but I also have like a love for estate sales, and you see all of these um, cutter quilts or like abandoned projects all the time at estate
Mm-hmm.
sales. And this was actually like a bunch of quilt squares that were semi-finished, half finished, you know, like in different states of being completed. And I thought it'd be so fun to take the fabric I find at estate sales because I'm, you know, like on a med student budget and turn them into new projects. So it was kind of a way for me to grow my sewing skills, but making stuff with things that had been like previously loved or, you know, just kind of abandoned with like the timeline of life, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was a good way for me to get my feet wet, especially like sometimes there's like yards and yards of like fabric that people just haven't touched that maybe was going to be backing or something. And it's like, okay, this doesn't feel too precious. I paid like $5 for like 10 yards of fabric, you know, like it's like
Yeah.
you don't have so much of a financial investment. So you feel like I felt like it was okay to make mistakes and kind of learn like with some of this thrifted fabric.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of thrifted fabric. Older fabric also can be really nice. Like, it's easy to work with, and if
It's
you
kind
kind
of
of
worn
find
in
the
a
right
little.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I found a place in town called the Sewing Cottage. It's at the Baptist Retirement Community here. And like people, I don't know, donate stuff or they pick stuff up from estate sales. And it's like basically one big estate sale, but it's just the fabric section or some sewing notions and things like that. So I
Yeah.
love thrifted fabric too. I
I
like plenty
am.
of new fabric, but
Yes. Every time I come to town, they're open like Tuesday through Thursday or Monday through Thursday.
yeah,
And I'm always coming on weekends to like see friends. And so I have not
yeah,
been able to be there because I've seen you and Bree post about it. And I'm like, I'm so jealous. I want
yes,
to check it out. But I will say the only caution I give with thrifted fabric or estate sale fabric is you have to smell it before you bring it home
yes.
because if it like reeks of like it's been in like a dusty place or dungy, you know, like you really have to make sure it smells. It's so hard to get smells out. So that's
Yeah.
I look crazy sometimes at estate sales smelling old quilt tops, but I'm gonna do it before I buy it and bring it into my house.
Yeah, well, that's just a mark of someone who knows what they're doing because anything that smells like cigarette smoke or mildew, it's really hard to get out. I feel like there's a certain vintage scent to thrifted fabric that's not a bad one, but there are
No.
some bad ones. So yeah, I totally
Yes.
agree. Um, can you tell us about your sewing machine? Because I'm dying to know the details about it.
Yeah, so I sewed on my mom's old like vintage Singer. It was a Singer 601
Mm-hmm.
and for a good long while. And there's someone local to me who he like has experience with vintage machines and he was doing like upkeep for me. But it kind of got to the point where he's like, okay, we need to like source another machine to like buy parts off of. And to
Uh-huh.
me, there was like more of a sentimental value in the machine, it being like the one my mom had used, my grandmother had used. And so at that point, I was like, let's not just replace all the parts, so I can keep sewing on it, and I'll just invest in a new machine. And this can be one that's like more like memory wise for me. And so I bought a Juki TL18.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I hear it's pretty common for people to go from like vintage singers to Jukis because um, just kind of like the workhorse power of them. So it's not computerized, it's a mechanical machine. And mine is street stitch only. But truly, it can sew through like so many layers. It's a workhorse. It goes fast, which I like. I'm not picky about seams or anything.
Yeah.
So
You don't
it
have
kind of
time
fit
for
the
that.
yeah, it fit the bill. I was comfortable with it. I think for some people it can be a little intimidating threading or dealing with bobbin because it's like a side load machine. Um, but it has been really good to me. Upkeep is minimal, and I would I would buy it like a 10 times over. It was well
Good.
worth the investment. It's like kind of their mid range. They have some more affordable machines, some like more kind of luxurious machines, and I like knew I wanted a pretty like a straight stitch, and I really like making bags with like quilted material, which adds up layer wise. So I wanted something that could
Yeah.
handle layers. So it's really nice because I'm sorry, I'm going to like a whole tangent about it now. There's a lever where you can raise and lower the foot to like accommodate different widths of fabric. So I
Uh-huh.
can like put in like almost up to an inch of
Oh,
thickness
wow.
like under the machine. So I've put it to work.
Yeah, good. No, it's always good because hearing the different machines people like and whatever and features, that's how we know
Yeah.
what we're gonna, I have a machine that I really like, but I'm always like, my next machine,
Yeah,
I don't need a machine, but I still like imagine the one I'm gonna get someday or whatever. So I like
exactly. And
hearing all this machine talk.
I will say kind of my only, it doesn't do zigzag, which I think would be nice sometimes. Because I don't have, sorry, I just blanked. Like a
A serger,
serger.
like to
There we go.
finish edges. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're sewing like garments or something that's like heavy use or like heavy wear, I don't really have a zigzag. I usually just like go do a couple straight seams in a row to try to help.
Yeah.
So I pull out my mom's machine if I need to zigzag anything, but it's pretty good workhorse. I highly recommend.
Good. Um, what was your first quilt that you decided to make? Did you find a pattern or
I
did you
did.
just go off?
Um, I do Okay, I do pride myself a lot and I like to reverse engineer stuff. If I see something I like, I'm like, I can usually make that. Like, generally, I'm pretty good about like, I can take measurements, I can kind of fiddle with things and find like tutorials online. So I don't buy a ton of patterns, but this one was a free Ruby Star summer sew along pattern. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was my first quilt like without my mom, like on my own on my
Right.
own. And so I did want a pattern to follow for that. And so I actually have it. It's like their summer sew along. It's literally just 5-inch squares. And it was really fun. It was a big project to tackle.
Yeah.
But it was nice to have a pattern to follow for that very first one. And now I look back and I'm like, I could have done, like I could have done this, but you don't know
Yeah.
like what you're capable of at the time. So I did follow a pattern for my first one, and I've followed some for others since. But usually I just find inspo pictures and then can kind of like, oh, I like how they did this on this one quilt, and I like this on this quilt, and so I just kind of like
Pick the best
make my
parts.
own. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's probably part of the creative joy that comes for some people. I'm a little bit of the same way. I've always been like that though, but I think that is a certain style of quilter. Some people are totally happy to just follow a million patterns forever, and I just didn't really like doing that. So I started doing my own kind of stuff, and that's how I like
Yeah.
to do it. So, and then the some of the designs people come up with like blow me away, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll never be able to do that. So, it's like a
I
whole
agree.
spectrum. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So you learned to sew from your mom and your grandma, and then you just taught yourself how to quilt. Do you quilt your own quilts, or do you piece and then have them long armed? How do you do that? How do you finish them?
Yeah. I think this is where you and I differ. So I usually long arm, mostly just because I have so much fun picking out the fabric, picking out the pattern, and then like
Mm-hmm.
actually the idea of making a quilt sandwich like just is too much for me. Also, I
Yeah.
do I do live in like a 500 square foot apartment, so I don't have that much room to like lay out big
Based it.
backing and batting and yeah, get it together. And so, and I also am very fortunate. Like I've thrifted a bunch of fabric, and people have like I've really met like a good quilting community here in Lubbock. And
Oh, good.
anytime some of them are a little older and they're like, this fabric's too young for me, you take it. And so I've been given a bunch of like very generous like some generous fabric. And so I really don't pay much for the materials that go into making a quilt. And so
Mm-hmm.
I kind of justify that with like, I'll pay for the long arming on the other end. And we have a few local long armers here who just do it for fun to like support their own fabric purchases, which I completely
Yeah.
support. And so it's pretty easy. There's like my next door neighbor, she long arms a bunch for me. And so
Oh my,
I
how
typically,
serendipitous. Like,
yeah,
oh, I'm
I
just gonna go
literally
next door.
I went to the quilt shop and I was like, okay, who is local, who long arms? And they gave me names and I just called the first one and she's like, oh, I live on this address. And I was like, wait a second, I live on this address. And so, yeah, it worked out really well that Amy long arms everything for me and I could just walk down and pick them up. And for me, that's kind of the way it works is like I spend not as much in like the fabric and materials. And so I can justify paying a little more for quilting or long arming on the other end than I usually bind them myself. So
Mm-hmm. Do you machine bind or hand bind?
I machine bind and I follow Machen. I think it's Machen Marie.
Mm-hmm.
She has a wonderful machine binding tutorial on Reels about
Mm-hmm.
like using Elmer's glue, which might not be like proper quilting, but it works beautifully. So it's a kind of a way for me to get binding on.
Yeah, good. Okay, so I based my quilts with Elmer's glue. So
Yeah,
who
it
knows
works so
what proper
well.
quilting is, but it works. So,
Yeah.
uh, good. Well, that's so cool. How did you really get plugged into your local quilting community? Was it literally just at an estate sale or quilt
It
shop
was
or what?
Yeah, so we have three quilt shops here, and I went to the first one, and honestly, they were a little standoffish. I think just
Mm-hmm.
like I was inexperienced. Maybe I was asking dumb questions. I don't know. And I sew on it like they're an authorized dealer for a brand I don't sew on, and I was asking the question like, "Hey, how do you help? Could you help me with this?" And I think it was just like a little bit of confusion on both ends. So I went to the next quilt shop, and they like just welcomed me with open arms. They like helped me find someone who could service my mom's singer. They helped me purchase the Juki I have, even though they're not an authorized dealer. They were like kind of helping me figure out what would be the best fit for me, which I like
Mm-hmm.
just appreciated so much. And they're who like has given me fabric and stuff. So that second store is really kind of where I found a community. And of course they're all retired and they meet and sew every morning from 9 to 11.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that would be the life. But right now I'm just in school. So on Saturdays I go in and see them. And that's usually when they catch me up on the gossip and what's happening. And right now it's like the Texas shop hop drama, so I'm getting all of that
Yeah.
from them.
I just got an email about there's one shop in San Angelo. Well, I guess that's participating in this like shop hop, and I was like, one of these days I'll do a shop hop, but I mean, what an
It's a
undertaking.
it is, and
Like,
they rent buses. They go
I
across Texas.
know.
Like
It's
I
very
went
serious.
and dropped some quilts off last week, and they had some shoppers from Canada in, and I was like, is this is this that big of a deal?
Whoa, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
they're going across Texas buying fabric. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the local community has been really welcoming and encouraging to me, even though we like tackle different projects and we use different fabrics. Like, not as many of them bag make as like I make a lot of bags, or
Mm-hmm.
um, sometimes they use more like traditional quilting, and I do a little more like some modern designs. And so it's been fun because like we can each admire each other's work and like creativity and like the skill behind it, while also like doing our own thing. So they've been so kind to welcome me and just be so encouraging along the way.
I um for the longest time I was just my own kind of quilter. I just was like, oh, I don't have time to contribute to a group or find a group or whatever. There's always an excuse or whatever. But
Yeah.
the last couple of years when I started going to the local like quilt club, they always say it's a club, it's not a guild. And I'm like, okay, I got it. I will not call it a guild. I love it so much. And it makes me really happy when I can talk to people who are um, younger in school or working, because there's such a archetype, I think, of just picturing a retiree who does nothing but sew all day or whatever. I don't know. That's not
Yeah.
even. I'm like, these women have totally full lives, even though they're retired or whatever. Um,
Yes.
but I felt like for the longest time, I was like, I'm just missing out because during normal business hours and then some, I'm at work. But it's been so good to try to go when I can. And I just always want to encourage podcast listeners to give it a shot because you never know. And you meet some really amazing people.
Yeah, I will say I was really intimidated the
Of
first time I
course. Of
went into a
course.
shop, asking probably dumb questions, and but like just the way they welcomed me and were like so excited to help, like truly. I think this as like shop owners, the people who they're not like official employees of the shop, but they're there every time I go. People who are invested in the local sewing community are just so excited about any level or skill of sewer who walks in their door, and they're like every step of the way they've been encouraging me to just try a little more, think about this, or have you tried this, and so from the very beginning when I was just learning how to thread my mom's singer to now, like they're helping me think about like more intricate patterns, or like what I like to really like play around with pantographs, and so
Uh
like
huh.
what pantograph I want to put on a quilt, like they have been encouraging like it every step of the way.
Yeah. And the cool thing is that now you can be that to someone someday. Um,
Yeah,
so, yeah,
it's
because we know how it feels.
Yeah, I will say, probably one of my favorite things that has come out of me sewing is when I was on my surgery rotation. There were only two other students on surgery, and we're all three actually like really good friends independently of being on this
Uh-huh.
clerkship together. And so I made us three matching scrub caps, and all of the residents picked up. They're like, "Why are all of you in matching scrub caps?" And because they were like bold with flowers and gingham and stripes. Like I'm a maximalist,
Yeah.
and even like the third person, he was a guy, and he like totally bought into it. He's wearing like a pink scrub cap. And when the residents found out, they're like, we've been wanting to sew. Like I got my mom's sewing machine, or I got my aunt's sewing machine, and I just like haven't found the time because it's kind of intimidating. And so we hosted a little like sewing club at my apartment, which was a little bit of a lot of people in my apartment. But it was so fun because we all got to tackle this project together, and then we all, of course, on Monday had to show off our new scrub caps and wear them. And so it's been really fun. I don't think it's like groundbreaking, but getting together and sewing together and like being like, oh hey, here's how I go around this corner on the pattern, or
Mm-hmm.
here's kind of how I adjust when I'm doing this. It was really fun to like all tackle it together. So now we've met a few times since then and done some different projects, but I will say, like, if someone's interested in sewing and they can find someone who's like willing to jump in with them, it made it like much less intimidating for me when I went to the shop and they were encouraging. So now I just try to be that. I'm like, come on over, we can sew, we can figure it out together. So it's really fun to sew together. I was nervous the first time because I was like, I feel like my skills are different than, like these ladies are so experienced and I'm like so inexperienced, but it's been nothing but a joy. So I highly encourage.
Yeah. Well, and everybody started somewhere, and that's the beauty I think of quilting is too. The other thing is like I don't know, I always see people who kind of had your experience. Like I went to this shop and they were so, you know, hoity toity or whatever. I'm like, okay, well, I get it because, not everything is everyone's cup of tea, but like try something else. Like just give it another try another place if you can, because you'll find your people. But
Yeah. I was really nervous after that first experience, but then
yeah,
literally the second shop I went to, they had like just opened and I was like, well, it's worth a shot. They're just in the neighborhood. I'll try it out. And I highly encourage if you've had a bad experience somewhere, just take a chance somewhere new because you're going to find the right people.
you will. And if you don't, you could just try to be that person for the next people. So
Yeah.
community is there. Sometimes we just have to work a little bit to create it. But I love that. I love that you're part of a community as well.
And if it's not there, I think you can find it on Instagram or TikTok. I've met so
Mm-hmm.
many fellow, that's how we met, like on
Yeah,
Instagram Quilt Talk. So, I highly recommend getting on social media, even if it feels embarrassing. You can do what I did. I started a second Instagram account so none of my real life people would know I was sewing.
that's what
Of
I
course,
do. This is
they've
my
all
like
found it
second
now.
life.
Yeah, yeah, but it's a good way for you. Just start posting your projects and finding people who like similar things to you, and you'll find people.
Yeah, you will for sure. And you can even I remember I saw I think you had sent Bree some Ruby Star scraps for Scrappy Strawberry project, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Allie and Bree know each other." So it's like a fun little way to like see, I don't know. Everybody I
Like
don't
all the
know. It's
connections. Yeah,
yeah, it is. Like what is it? 7 degrees of separation or whatever, but not even that much
yes,
because it's a small world
not
in
in
the
West
quilting
Texas.
world, but yeah. Yeah. Um I feel like quilters tend to be really generous people too because I think that's almost an inherent like almost part of quilting is that if you think about it, this was something that was passed down almost as part of like oral history and tradition from mothers to daughters or aunts to nieces or however it happened. And I personally still feel a compulsion to share with people like, this is how I did this, or look, this is how I made this. So I feel like that's almost how you get closure on your quilting journey. It's like I'm ready to share it with other people and have kind of that I don't know, connection, I guess, like actively have that connection with people, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. And I think about this a lot because I was looking for projects that I've sewed to maybe show you today. And I really don't keep a lot for myself. I give a lot of like because
I
it's
do
so much fun
too.
to give it to people.
I
And I
know.
think a lot, my mom was like a very generous sewer. She never turned down hemming pants or hemming a skirt. And I'm like, that's the most annoying type of sewing. And she would like willingly do it if somebody asked her because they knew she had the
Mm-hmm.
skills. And so that's kind of what I try to be in my sewing is like a generous sewer as well because she was always like making stuff just to give it to people because she knew someone needed this or someone was looking at that or someone complimented this. And so um yeah, I think it's kind of inherent to the quilting community is like they're very generous and in general. Like I think about like I feel like every day on my Instagram feed I see a scrappy happy strawberry and that's a quilt block that So Mary Happy gave away for free. And I just think about how many people have been blessed by like Mary's general like I literally have my strawberry quilt sitting here. Like Mary's been so generous with her pattern and encouragement along the way. And so I think it's pretty inherent to the quilting and sewing community.
Yeah, I think so too. And just, I don't know, it's like a weird feeling of joy and happiness and pride when you're like, so and so has learned to quilt, and you feel like, what if I inspired them? So we've talked a little bit about how you've been able to kind of prioritize sewing for um, I guess you would call it, it's like active rest. Have you read about this? Like actively
Yeah.
resting versus like passively resting. I wanted to try to sort of talk through ways we can create or find time in our busy schedule because it's so busy all the time. And I remember med school and I remember residency, and I told you not to be discouraging, but I don't know how I don't know how I survived. Like I remember thinking when I was a resident, I was like, I can sleep, I can shower, or I can eat, and I could pick like two of those things. Like I could never do
Yeah, you can't do
all
all
three
of
of them because I
them.
didn't have time. But somehow I was still quilting, you know?
Yeah.
And so I was trying to think through because I think so many of us, especially on Instagram, you see people are newlyweds or have newborns or they're working or they're in residency or in med school. And so I was like, how can we kind of encourage people to carve out time? And I think the one thing that I'll start with is, like you mentioned, just prioritizing it and just understanding that taking some time to do something that really resets your heart and mind and soul is a good thing, and it's important, and I would say it's necessary in a world like we live in right now. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking, I'm like, I don't know if I really like find time, but I think I make time because I know
Mm-hmm.
like when I've done something, and for me, sewing is like fun for me. When I've done something that's like encouraging for me, like something that I can like put my creativity into, put my problem solving into, I'm like a better person on the other end. Like I
Mm-hmm.
have my like kind of my passion projects or my things I'm working on. It makes things like more enjoyable when I'm at work or at school or with friends. Like I have things that are kind of refueling me on my own. And for me, sewing is one of those. So it's kind of been a, a dichotomy of like make it a priority, but also it has to happen. Like finding it's a hobby, but it needs to happen.
Yeah.
And so it's really like just kind of always being ready to jump in. Like I think about like similarly when I'm trying to cut like social media time down, it's like if I have a book and I know I can open the book instead of like open social media, it's like much easier versus if my book is like in my room tucked away. And
Right.
so similarly, I don't have like a dedicated sewing space. I just keep my sewing machine next to my desk or my computer. And so when I finally get a break from like Zoom meetings or from studying, I just like literally scoot my chair like 3 feet over and I'm like, okay, I have enough time to sew like a block today. And so just finding that like pocket and having it like easily accessible, which I know isn't always the case for everybody, but I can live in a little bit of chaos and have the sewing machine, the fabric on one side, and the books and the backpack on the other side. And so, yeah, I think it's worth like finding the time. And that looks different for everyone, but I think when you can get to a point where sewing is fun for you, like you know how to thread the machine, you know how to reload the bobbin, you know how to cut fabric according to the pattern, and it becomes like a little more fun and a little less like daunting, then it's much easier to jump in at like any given time.
Yeah, you're right. That's such a good point. I used to get so I'd tell my grandma, I cannot figure this out or I cannot get this to do. And she'd be like, well, you just need to practice. That's it. And I'd be like, well, but
Yeah,
it's true because the more you just do something without that pressure of like, oh, this has to be perfect or whatever, then it does become a second nature kind of thing. And it's not a big mental hurdle to, oh, I have to go do this. It's like, oh, I can't wait for this study session to be over so I can go get in my machine. And then I was going to say too, you have the best point, which is having even a little space just to have at least your machine out where you don't have to go like pull 12 pounds out of the closet and set it up every single time makes it such a lower barrier to entry to just be like,
yes,
okay, I have 15 minutes and my machine is like threaded in here because it would take me 5 minutes to set it up.
clean it, thread it. Yeah,
Yeah, all the things. So I think that's a really really good insight because and you do have to live in a little bit of chaos and it's fine. Um, I remember
I
I just had my
also,
machine out on my like
oh
little
yeah,
dining table in my townhouse that I lived in residency. So I was
yeah,
like, well, if you want to come over, just don't mind the machine. I'm like,
yeah,
that's sharp. Don't touch it. But like it's just there. Just ignore it. So,
yeah. I will say I do have a little bit of a bad habit. If I get started on a project at night, I like want to finish it.
mm-hmm.
And so I do stay up pretty late sometimes sewing and regret it
Yeah.
in the morning. But my mom was also a nocturnal sewer. Like I remember like we would come in from like playing outside or come in from, like school and like we'd be getting ready for bed and she's like, come try on this dress really quick and let me pin it the hem at the right place so I can make sure I can get it done tonight. And so she would like right before bedtime, I always remember trying on like whatever Halloween costume she was working on. And then like we would go to bed and she would sew. So sometimes I think in different it's at different times. Like right now I'm sewing in the middle of the day because I'm a fourth year and I've got no responsibilities. But last year I was sewing like one weekend every 8 weeks. And so it just like, it fluctuates. But I do find like when I'm sewing or like making time for it, I'm like, I have a much better like just attitude about things.
Yes. Yeah. I like I mentioned earlier, I work actually part-time now and I once I was able to cut back, I was really really burnt out. I think it was just from this was my first job out of residency and then we were working insane hours because we're just a little bit short staffed. And then I had children and so I
Yeah.
had a 1.5-year old and then I was pregnant again and then I had another
Yeah.
and I just had like two toddlers at home and I was like something's like gotta give. And I was still creating and sewing, but I just didn't have a lot of time for it. And I just always felt like I was sacrificing too much to go do that.
Yeah.
But then once I was able to kind of step back at work, I was like, man, I suddenly had more time to give to coming out and taking some time to sew. And I was like, man, this is crazy, but I'm a better doctor, a better wife, a better mom, a better friend, like everything. And I think a lot of it was just because I felt like I had a little bit more freedom to prioritize sewing and being creative. And then I just told my husband, I was like, listen, I'm going to have to go find some time to be creative because as much as I wish I was like a gym rat and I got runner's high from like sprinting down, I don't. I
That's not
just
me. Yeah.
don't. I don't like it. It doesn't fill me up at all. It just feels like torture. Um, I'll move in different ways, but it's usually not like a dedicated 2 hours of my time every single day. But I was
Yeah.
like, I have to make time to come be creative and sew at least a couple days a week because it just it just does something for me that nothing else is going to do and it just makes me a better well-rounded person. So,
Yeah. And I think it's like I don't think it's sewing inherently. I think it's like flexing that creative muscle. Like
yeah.
some people get that in their job, some people get that in like other outside hobbies, but like for us it's like the creativity of sewing and creating a pattern or um reverse engineering something or putting the colors together, like finding out what works for you.
Yep. And some of it for me, I think, is like that analog feel of this is very tactile and I'm making something that I'm going to use or somebody else
Yeah.
can use. And I don't know. I love that. I have this weird, I think, old fashioned brain that I'm like, I just need to touch that or hold that book while I'm reading it. I have that kind of
Yeah.
brain, I think. So it feels kind of a part of my, I don't know, my spirit.
Yeah. Old soul.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we've touched a little bit about it, but um, have you ever thought, like, really thought about? I think you probably feel it in your heart because know you can so easily verbalize your mother's legacy and your grandmother's legacy that's living through you. But have you thought about how you're passing that on to your next generation of sewists?
Yeah, I mean, I feel so grateful like for the people of my life who taught me and were patient with me. And so I try to pay that forward like how I can. And it looks different in different seasons and different capacities, but I honestly think it's just like being kind of an encourager. Sometimes people are just they just need someone to like literally sit with them as they sew, and that's like easy for me to do. It doesn't cost me any money, like I can
Yeah.
do that with what I have right now. So, yeah, I think it's just like kind of being an encouragement when somebody finds out I sew or somebody tells other people I sew and they're like, oh, I've been wanting to do this or I've been thinking about that. I'm like, oh, let's do it. Like, let's find a day and set an afternoon aside and jump in because, like, I think the idea of it can be really daunting, but once you jump in, you realize it's not that bad. And so, trying to be that encourager, supporter as people are in different levels of journey of sewing. And so, it's been people my age, it's been people younger than me, it's been people older than me. Like, I've really gotten to sew with a bunch of people during medical school. Like, even one of my attendings, like her daughter really wanted to learn how to sew, and so she's been coming over and sewing, and so she's like a little fourth grader, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is the next generation. I mean, she's already better than me, but it's the next generation.
It is. It's so cool. I love that. I love it. Um, yeah, and I think being an encourager and then just being kind of an example. I just did an episode where I was talking about how, like, kind of remembering how my grandmother, because she's the one who taught me to quilt, well, really to sew, but it was through quilting that I learned to sew. And that was like such a big thing, is she was just like, it was like not a big deal at all. When I was like, I want to learn to sew, she's like, okay, let's do it. And then we
Yeah.
actually did. And I was like, it would be so easy to be like, maybe sometime, but like the follow through and the encouragement is kind of all it takes sometimes to get someone like kind of hooked. And
Yeah.
I think knowing, like for me, how important and special like the act of sewing and quilting is, makes it feel really important to like pass it on to somebody else who might have that same experience and have that same like love in their heart for it.
Yeah, and I don't know, I feel so fortunate, like, my mom and my grandmother were obviously my family, but not everybody has a sewer in the family,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Yeah.
it's like, I can be that person, I can sit with you, and, sometimes it also just takes being the person you can ask, like, dumb questions to, because I remember the lady who owns a quilt shop here in my city that I, first kind of connected with, I literally was like, "Okay, I don't know how to load this bobbin," and, and she was so patient with me, and so just having sometimes not even like all the wisdom, but just like a little bit of wisdom or experience that you can share and like not just like be that person who's open to questions or answering what you can is makes it easier and more approachable.
Yeah, for sure. Agree. Well, thank you so much for your time, Allie. I don't want to keep you too much
Yeah.
longer. Is there any other hot quilting topic that we didn't cover or that you want to talk about or anything of that sort? Did we miss anything?
Um I don't think so.
Well, that's it for this episode of Patchwork Revival. I loved having you here with me talking all things quilty. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave a rave review. Also, be sure to jump down to the show notes to find links for this episode, as well as the link to my shop where you can enjoy 15% off as a podcast listener with code REVIVAL. Remember that the Patchwork Revival podcast is here to celebrate the connection made in the quilts we love. I'll see you next time.